Prologue. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Jean Runcandle often had this thought. Am I destined for failure? This young man full of potential had yet to reach his 30s. He didn't always have this belief in mind while he was growing up. There was a time when he had ambitious goals and grand dreams like anyone else. For example, one such instance was the day he first held a sword as the youngest child of the Runcandle clan. During his childhood, Jean believed that his future held great success, honor, and fame, just like his father and siblings. However, Jean had no talent. For generations, members of the Runcandle clan became one-star knights by the age of 13. In the long history of the family that exceeded 1,000 years, there was not a single child that had failed to become a one-star knight before turning 14. An average Runcandle would become a 3-star knight by the age of 16, and would later travel the world after becoming a 5-star knight before turning 20. But Jean was 25 by the time he became a 1-star knight. Even a clown with absolutely no talent at all could accomplish this feat, as long as he put in a sufficient amount of effort. Because they had seen Jin's noteworthy efforts, his siblings banished him without killing him. But it wasn't that I had no talent. It wasn't that at all. After leaving his family, Jean was surprised to learn that his talent lay within a field other than the sword. Magic. Jean was extremely talented in magic. While he was wandering aimlessly, he accidentally became a magician's disciple, and within 3 years of training, the God of Shadows offered him a contract. He was on a solid path to becoming the grand magician of his era. The God of Shadows, Sodaret, was a being that all magicians yearned for. Furthermore, Jean learned that he was also gifted with the sword from Sodaret. Contractor, it seems that someone bore a grudge against you since your childhood. You haven't been able to use your full potential due to a trivial curse. That might have been the reason why I was so captivated by you. Trivial. That was how Sodaret described the curse that had been suppressing Jin's talents. A 9-star magician was the cause of the curse in question, which was called the Bladed Illusion. Needless to say, Jean was unaware that he had been cursed until Sodaret informed him. Sodaret easily dispelled the curse that had been tormenting Jean. The blood-red chains hidden inside Jin's body were absorbed by the shadows. You can now become an unparalleled magic swordsman, Contractor. I'll be watching over you with excitement. It was true. Following Sodaret's words, Jean picked up the sword he had once thrown away. With every swing, he was reaching new levels of mastery. The greatest failure of Runcandle's history, Jean Runcandle, was no more. In one hand, magic. In the other, a sword. Within 10 years, he would become so powerful that he wouldn't have to hide from his clan, the family that had thrown him aside. All that was left to do was to become history's strongest magic swordsman and to rule over the world. Seems like I truly am destined for failure. Cough. Jean spat out a mouthful of blood. He was bleeding everywhere, including his eyes, nose, and ears. Death was looming over him. He hadn't even had the chance to use his magic or Sodaret's power. 3 9-star knights had attacked the Akin Kingdom's capital out of the blue, and Jean had received a fatal wound during their rampage in his sleep. In his sleep. A single 9-star knight could raise a nation the size of the Akin Kingdom within half a day. And since 3 of them had raided the capital city, there was nothing Jean could have done. He couldn't even react because he had just finished training and had fallen asleep from exhaustion. What a ridiculous death he had. He wanted to cry out in madness due to the absurdity, but all that escaped his blood. Filled mouth was delirious laughter. He was on death's door, and nobody was by his side. Not his teacher who cared for him, not his siblings and family who had cast him aside, not a single person. Even Sodaret showed no response. Why? Why did the heavens bother giving me an opportunity just to take it away immediately? And so, Jean Runcandle closed his eyes. While he held no lingering feelings, he had many regrets about his life. Chapter 1. Runcandle's Superstition. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wah, you wah. Is it normal to hear a baby's cries as you die? Jean thought to himself. Was he having auditory hallucinations from the blood loss? Or was the neighbor's child crying from the 9-star Knight's attack? If it were the latter, then it was unfortunate. The Akin kingdom would fall today, so there was no way a newborn could survive the destruction. I'd love to save it, but I'm in no condition to help others. My body was cut in half. I hope I'll be reborn in a blissful world instead of a miserable one. Wah wah. The wail was getting louder and louder. It wouldn't surprise him if the baby died of asphyxiation from crying at the top of its lungs. What a pathetic death. I couldn't even save a baby in front of me. His vision was filled with darkness. There was no sign of the baby stopping. As he endured the shame and listened helplessly, Jean wondered why he wasn't dead yet. Not only had he received countless fatal wounds, his body had been sliced in two at the waist. There was no way he could have survived for another 10 seconds. Nonetheless, the wailing never stopped. Wait, the sound is coming from my body. He couldn't understand what was happening. Jean was the one letting out those cries. Today was September 9, 1780. The youngest son of the clan of Swordmasters, Jean Runcandle, was born. 100 days have passed since his rebirth. Jean could now skillfully crawl around, and he had no choice but to accept the truth unfolding before him. He had been reborn after his death. There was no other explanation. And there was no way he could explain it to others, as he could barely form any words. And even if I tell people after I become 5 years old, no one would believe that I have 28 years' worth of memories in my head. They would just dismiss it as a child's joke or delusion. If he were to mention the detailed history or secrets of the family, then some people could potentially believe him. However, the chances of him being treated as a cursed child were extremely high. Therefore, Jean was once again destined to live as the youngest son of the dreadful Runcandle clan. The youngest child of the Runcandle clan. It was an incredible privilege. Most people living in the world would consider being born as the Runcandle's youngest an extraordinary blessing. However, Jean was at a loss. I would have preferred being reborn in an ordinary family. In that scenario, it wouldn't have taken him 100 days to accept the truth about his situation. He was reborn in the same family, as the same child, on the same day as his past life. In other words, he was most likely gifted with the same talents as his previous life. Swordsmanship and magic. However, the Runcandles hated magic. The Zipfel clan, the clan of magicians, was the Runcandles' greatest enemy. The youngest child of the Runcandle again. I wonder if the curse that Sodoret dispelled is still on me. How should I run away from this family and learn magic this time? There was no way he could learn magic without leaving the Runcandle house. If the curse that Sodoret had dispelled was affecting him again, then he wouldn't be able to learn swordsmanship either. As he pondered deeply, Jin's eyes slowly began to shut. His body couldn't obey his mind and resist its natural needs. And so, he fell into a deep sleep. 1 year has passed since his rebirth. Time was trickling slowly, one day at a time. Jean was sick of coming up with plans for the future now. His body could never resist the temptation of a snooze, and he was bored to death of living as an inarticulate baby. I want to grow up faster. This is so frustrating. I can't do anything as I am right now. All he could do was drink milk from a bottle and fall asleep when the time came. And whenever he relieved himself in his diapers, Gilly, his nanny, would come replace them. It was an extremely shameful experience for Jean, who had the mind of an adult man. That was all his daily schedule had entailed during the entire year. Step, step. A certain woman entered Jin's room. She was the mistress of the house, Rosa Runcandle. She had ebony hair and a sharp gaze decorating her straight, pointy nose. Despite her alluring charm, she appeared quite shrewd and overpowering, which earned her the nickname Black Panther from others. Are the preparations over, Gilly? Of course, ma'am. Today's the day the young master selects, so I've paid special attention to everything. Good. Then let's go immediately. Jean realized that today was his birthday from their conversation. The children of the Runcandle family go through a certain ritual called selection on their first birthday. It was a ritual where the adults laid around dozens of items on the floor, and made the baby crawl towards one of them and grab the item. There was a superstition that when the child selected an item, the item would be a representation of the child's future and destiny. Strangely enough, the Runcandles were obsessed with this superstition. Rosa picked up Jean and moved to the castle's central hall. At the hall's center stood a man, arms crossed. He was Jin's father, the strongest knight of the present era, Siren Runcandle. Father. It was Jin's first time seeing his father after his rebirth. Having reached the demigod realm, Siren was very rarely present at the castle. He was always away fighting wars or training in some remote location. And my siblings, his 12 siblings, were also present. While they had treated Jean like a weakling and a useless insect in his past life, they hadn't committed such acts as of yet. They were all waiting for Jean with wide smiles on their faces. As he remembered the suffering he had gone through because of them, his chest began to feel stuffy. Rosa, put Jean down. His mother followed his father's instructions. As his limbs reached the cold marble floor, a slight shiver shook his body. 2 meters away from him lay the items for the selection ritual. He could see a book, 2 coins, a single grain of rice, along with over 20 different types of swords impaling the hall floor. Jean just had to choose one item among all these. This is crazy. I couldn't remember the ritual from my past life because I was too young back then, but now that I see it in person, it's insane. Do they actually plan on making a baby crawl through countless swords and grab one by the blade? In his past life, Jean had selected a sword. Since the book, coins and grain of rice were hidden amongst the countless swords, it was no surprise that all the Runcandle children had selected the weapons. Now, choose one of them, son. The members of the Runcandle family watched Jean crawl with great anticipation. They were all curious to see which sword the youngest child would select. Whether it would be twin swords, a great sword, a long sword, or a completely different one. As the tense gazes focused on Jean, he began to crawl towards the sword he had selected previously. The people around the world probably had no idea that the renowned Runcandles made their children go through such a ridiculous ritual every time. Ugh! Jean was frustrated that he couldn't advance faster. Crawling was taking so long and so much energy. The sword I subconsciously chose in the past was quite an inconvenience, but this time, I'll intentionally select that same sword. Ba-dump. Ba-dump. He could feel his tiny heart beating with power. The weapons were planted in a circle. The item Jean wanted was in the middle. As he rolled and crawled around, Jean passed by the sword closest to him. The eyes of all the observers in the hall went wide. Even if the child were from the renowned clan of Swordmasters, babies would almost always select the item closest to them. However, Jean was zigzagging through the forest of swords, and the others couldn't help but gulp with each of his movements. They were all thinking the same thing. Could he be going for that sword? Jean continued swerving through the blades as the eyebrows on Siren and Rosa's frozen faces began twitching in response to each sword he grazed. Gaga. Jean had finally selected his sword. Blood began dripping down the fingers touching the blade. Everyone's gazes slowly moved from the baby towards the sword in question, and the siblings' jaws instantly dropped. They all believed that Jean had coincidentally selected that sword, but the truth couldn't be more different. He had crawled like a madman to reach this specific weapon. He ended up depleting all his energy, as controlling a 1-year-old's body wasn't simple, even with the mind of an adult. Crawling all the way here intentionally was so exhausting, so how on earth did I accidentally select this sword in my previous life? His hand was touching Barasata. It was the sword's name, and was the clan's emblem. For many generations, this sword could only be wielded by the Runkandle patriarchs. To be more specific, the patriarchs that had been recognized and acknowledged by all the members of the Runkandle clan. The number of times Barasata had been selected during the ritual in Runkandle history could be counted on one hand. And every single child that had selected Barasata grew up to become the patriarch of the Runkandle house. Every single child except for Jean Runkandle from his first life. Jean chose the founder's sword. Siren spoke in a solemn tone. A few people were cheering in joy, and a few others were trying their best to hide their displeasure. This was what the Runkandle superstition was about. The ritual is over. And bring Jean to the Storm Castle. Chapter 2. Stormy Days at the Castle. 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 6 years have passed since the day Jean selected Barasata. He no longer had to experience the shame of having his nanny replace his diapers, but it was still difficult for him to imitate the attitude of a child. I want to escape from this Storm Castle already. The Storm Castle. A castle detached from the Runkandle clan's main castle. Every Runkandle child cannot take a single footstep outside the Storm Castle until they turn 10, to protect them from assassination attempts. What kind of madman would try to assassinate the Runkandle children? Even their worst enemies, the Zipfuls, wouldn't dare to. In actuality, there was a certain case around 200 years ago when someone had attempted it. The Kungan clan, another clan of Swordmasters, had attacked the Runkandles, and 9 young children of the Runkandle clan ended up getting killed. However, the very next day the entire Kungan clan was annihilated, including every family member and the extended families of the servants, and disappeared into the annals of history. Ever since then, it had been a tradition and rule within the Runkandle household to have every child remain within the Storm Castle after their selection rituals until they became 10 years of age. I'm so bored. The atmosphere in the Storm Castle was indeed worthy of its name. It was located at the peak of Mtimurakan, which was presumed to be the tallest mountain in the world. As its name suggested, a tempest was surrounding the castle at all times, during all 4 seasons. The rain, gales, and lightning constantly affected the mountaintop. This place isn't suitable for a child's emotional growth. No wonder my brothers ended up becoming so violent and brutal. It's because of this goddamn place. There were only 2 other Runkandle children residing in the castle with Jean. His 10 other siblings had all exceeded the age of 10. Jean and his 2 brothers, the 5 elite knights protecting them, their nannies, and the 10 Duttish servants were the only people occupying the Storm Castle. Jean. As soon as he heard the voice calling him, Jin's frustration and irritation increased exponentially. The boy calling for him with that annoying voice was Daytona Runkandle. He was older than Jean by 2 years. Why are you alone without your incredible Barasata? Did you lose it? Kohaha. And the other brother who was mocking him was Haytona Runkandle. As their names implied, the 2 were identical twins. The Tana twins of the Runkandle clan. During his first life, everyone who had dealt with these twins unanimously agreed on one statement. That they were the devil's spawn. These annoying brats. Jean turned around to face them. He had not a single good memory about the Tana twins. They had bullied him from an early age solely for selecting Barasata during his ritual. And one would be severely mistaken to underestimate the 9-year-old brats and their harassments. The first thing these brothers did when they left the Storm Castle at the age of 10 in his previous life was to assassinate someone. That was how messed up they were by nature. As Jean didn't react to their mockery, the Tana twins continued to harass him. Gilly, Jin's nanny, had temporarily left the Storm Castle today. The twins had been eagerly waiting for this day to come, and had no intention to let Jean spend the day in peace. Oi, we're talking to you. Where is Barasada? The Tana twins had begun to torment him 1 year ago in this life. It had started off as some light harassment that Gilly wouldn't notice. Some examples were locking the door when Jean went to the bathroom, or pouring a bunch of salt in his soup. But afterwards, it began to escalate. They tied a dead bird on the door handle to Jin's room, and secretly released a venomous scorpion from the Storm Castle's garden onto Jin's bed. Nonetheless, Jean had endured the harassment in silence. The twins approached their younger brother with large strides. As he watched them indifferently, a smirk began to form on Jin's face. I'm not sure where I put it. Oh, maybe I stuffed it up your asshole. Snap. The twins froze, and stared back and forth between each other and their youngest brother. That wasn't the reaction they had been expecting from him. Asshole. Despite being innate murderers, the Tana twins were still 9-year-old children. It was an aggressive term for the two of them. When they realized the offensive nature of the expression, the Tana's faces began boiling in rage. What did you just? Did you lose your mind, Jean? Wake up already. Your nanny isn't here to protect you today. Pfft, Jean let out a small sneer, and took a step towards his brothers. The Tana twins weren't the only ones waiting for his nanny's absence. Rather, Jean had been waiting for this day to come far more ardently than them. He couldn't wait to beat these little demons into submission. My past 7-year-old self could never even have thought of standing up against the Tana twins. But he was different now. Even if the two brothers before him were a decade older, Jean was confident he could kill at least one of them. Not having realized the urgency of their situation, the Tana twins boldly continued glaring at Jean. If you beg for forgiveness right now, we'll let you off by just breaking your nose. Otherwise, we'll make sure you're in a state far worse than the bird on your door yesterday. Approximately 5 steps for a 7-year-old. That was the distance between Jean and his brothers in the Storm Castle's hallway. Ack! Suddenly, Daytona yelped as he crouched on the floor. The startled Daytona looked around to check their surroundings, only to realize that his twin brother's back was being squashed by Jean underfoot. Jean had instantaneously narrowed the distance between them and had planted his fist in Daytona's stomach. Ugh. Eventually, Daytona took a punch to the jaw and collapsed on the floor. It was their first time being hit in this manner. Moreover, their 7-year-old brother's fist felt like a chunk of ice. Cold and hard. Wah, what was that? The instant he got hit, Daytona caught sight of a dark aura surrounding Jin's fist. But he didn't have time to dwell on it. As he began to return to his senses, another punch came flying at him. Thwack. Ugh. His painful cry couldn't escape from his mouth, as if his throat were blocked by something. All he could do was rack his brains and figure out where everything had gone wrong as throbbing tears ran down his face. No one else was in the hallway. They had chosen this location specifically to harass Jean, but the Tana twins could never have imagined that their decision would come back to bite them. About that pitiful bird you two trampled to death, I gave it a proper burial. Thud, thud, thwack. Jean continued straddling the two unconscious twins and swung his fists as he spoke in a monotonous voice. Am I going too far? They are technically still kids. A sudden hesitation came over him, but ended up disappearing as quickly as it had come. The previous versions of the 9-year-old Tana brothers were far worse than the current him. They even made him swallow horse shit. If Jean were to hold back today, the twins would most likely try to commit similar acts again. Phew. Twitch, twitch. After a long beating, the bodies of the two unconscious twins began convulsing. Their youngest brother finally stood up and looked down on them indifferently. You two better do your best not to catch my attention from now on. As long as you want to live, that is. Young master. Having sensed the unusual atmosphere in the castle, a knight in charge of their protection came running down the hallway. He was a top-class guardian knight, and normally wouldn't have been shocked by a fistfight between kids, even if they were from the Runcandle clan. However, even he couldn't help but stare in disbelief at Jean, who was looking down indifferently towards the unconscious twins lying on the ground. The 7-year-old young master pummeled his older brothers. He couldn't believe it. Normally, there should have been a large difference in physique between a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. Moreover, the Tawna twins had been learning the Runcandle martial arts recently. On the other hand, Jean had yet to start learning martial arts. In fact, he hadn't begun to learn anything at all. At least, that's what the guardian knight had been told. Uff. Young Master Jean, what just, the knight asked him as Daytona let out a barely audible moan. They started fighting each other out of nowhere. Excuse me. They fought each other. The knight realized immediately that Jean was lying, but he couldn't pursue the matter anymore. He could see Jean smirking, as if everything had gone according to his plan. While the guardian knight's duty was to protect the children, he was still an outsider to this family. He was not in a position where he could argue with the young masters of the Storm Castle. I already knew that the children of the Runcandle clan were violent and brutal, but this just confirms my beliefs. I should just report to the Patriarch and stay out of this. The knight courteously bowed to Jean. He may be a 7-year-old, but he was still a bona fide Runcandle by blood. I understand. Then I shall take the Tawna young masters to the doctor. No need. There's somewhere else my brothers need to go. Somewhere else. Where is that? The grave. The grave. Carry them for me. As the light in Jin's eyes changed, the knight had no choice but to pick up the unconscious boys on his shoulders. Let's go. He awkwardly followed the young boy before him. Jean was headed towards the small mound in the Storm Castle's backyard, where a heavy rainstorm was crashing down. It was the bird's grave. The bird the Tawna twins had killed. The small mound hadn't been destroyed by the downpour yet. Put them down. But young master, the fierce rainstorm was about to swallow up the knight and Jean, not to mention the two unconscious boys. Jean didn't reply and merely stared at him dead in the eye. The knight soon realized that it was a command. He could see it from Jin's attitude. It was the attitude of a Runcandle who was giving a serious order. He could never have imagined that a 7-year-old could have such an imposing and kingly aura. The knight had no right to refuse. Even if the command would harm another Runcandle, he still couldn't refuse it. In the first place, the Tawna twins weren't awake to order him to refuse right now. All he could do was follow the command of the Runcandle before him. It wasn't up to him to consider the consequences of these orders, it was up to the Patriarch and the elders. Even if the Tawna twins were to die of hypothermia, the Runcandle clan wouldn't put the blame on the knight. Familial disputes and quarrels were common within the clan. I shall comply, young master. He put the twins down in front of the grave. The two boys were still motionless, except for a few occasional twitches. The Tawna twins were rescued 2 hours later by Gilly, who was returning from her outing. The two of them had acute pneumonia for a few days, and didn't dare to look Jean in the eyes until the day they left the Storm Castle. The continent's eastern region, the unprotected area. Also known as the Black Sea. Siren had been meditating in this monster-infested land for a few days now. He was merely sitting on the ground, but the nearby monsters wouldn't dare approach him, even the ones the size of buildings. Soon, a man covered in the blood of countless monsters walked toward Siren. Greetings to the Patriarch. This is Khan. It was the guardian knight who had obeyed Jin's orders and left the Tawna twins out in the rainstorm 10 days ago. Is something the matter? Siren asked as he carefully opened his eyes. I have come to report about a dispute between the young masters at the Storm Castle. There's no way you'd disturb my training just because of a dispute between children. Speak freely. Khan explained the details of the incident, and a smile grew on Siren's face. So, did the twins die? They did get acute pneumonia, but their lives aren't in danger. Then they must have learnt an important lesson. I see. You may return. Understood. Khan had desperately struggled against countless monsters for 3 whole days just to make this short report, but he didn't hold any resentment against the patriarch or the young master. He silently returned to the direction of the storm castle. I should go see the youngest for myself. And so, Siren made an appearance at the storm castle 1 month later. Chapter 3. Stormy Days at the Castle, 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When Siren left the Black Sea, the Runcandles living outside the storm castle became busy. They had to welcome back the patriarch who was returning from his outing for the first time in 5 years. Every Runcandle flag-bearer must gather at the storm castle, except for those working on imperial requests. The Black Panther Rosa Runcandle's command spread around the world like a pulse. The flag-bearers of the clan working in the Vermont Empire, Akin Kingdom, Jean Kingdom, Curano Dukedom, etc. all promptly gathered at the storm castle. What is going on? Our youngest brother's selection ritual ended years ago, so why is father coming to the storm castle? Siren's third son, Ran Runcandle, had returned from the continent's northern region, where he had been mowing down monsters. Did the guardian knights stationed at the storm castle mention anything? Siren's fourth son, Vigo Runcandle. He had to suspend his assassination task commissioned by a big shot of the Curano Dukedom in order to return. His client would most definitely be displeased, but he had no other choice. Unfortunately for him, the Runcandle clan wouldn't compensate its agents for discontinuing their ongoing missions in order to answer their summons. Nothing at all. Seems like it's a confidential matter. Well, I'm not surprised. Even father is personally coming, Siren's third daughter, Mary Runcandle. She had been dueling and defeating powerful warriors in the southern region. And so, 7 of Siren's children assembled at the storm castle, along with a total of more than 200 knights and aides who had been assisting them. BDNVL.M. With this many members, they could destroy an average city in a mere 30 minutes, and an average country in a single day. When the news that Siren had begun to move spread around the world, various rumors began to spread within the ruling class. Why is Siren making a move? Didn't he say he wouldn't leave the Black Sea for another 10 years? Are the Runcandles finally planning to dominate the world? Did the Zipful clan show any reaction to this? The world's one and only Genesis Knight, Siren. Siren's offsprings, the Runcandles. The ripple effect of these names was huge. Siren's children and the clan's guardian knights were standing in 2 rows on both sides of the stairs leading up to the storm castle. Under the heavy rainstorm, the look in everyone's eyes was serious. They all appeared determined, as if they were about to go to war. Greetings to the Patriarch. Greetings to the Patriarch. As Siren arrived at the storm castle's entrance, they simultaneously raised their swords in the air. The mountaintop shook with their resonating voices, as if landslides would occur everywhere. With a slight nod, Siren began ascending the stairs. Father's mood is odd. Is something extremely important about to happen? The Runcandle children exchanged glances, sharing their thoughts without any words. As Siren passed by them, they slowly followed his footsteps with serious expressions. The guardian knights remained behind and guarded the storm castle gates. However, none of them were aware of the truth. The reason Siren had come to the storm castle was simply to see his youngest child. Daytona. Yes, father. Siren summoned the Tana twins first. The sick brothers knelt before their father as their runny noses caused snuffles to resound in the throne room. Tell me what mistake the 2 of you made. Jean was waiting inside his room with Gilly, so he couldn't hear the conversation. The Tana twins hesitated to answer. As seconds passed, Siren's eyebrow twitched slightly. I asked you to tell me what mistake you made. That's, in Jin's previous life, the Tana twins had committed their first murder right after leaving the Storm Castle, at the age of 10. And as they grew older, they killed an average of 50 people every year. They were, quite literally, homicidal maniacs. However, as of right now, they were just 9-year-old brats. They were at the age when their strict father terrified them. Moreover, the word strict couldn't do their father justice. Not only that, their father had asked for their mistake. They had gotten pummeled by their younger brother. If they had to blame something or someone, it was Jean. The twins seemed to have forgotten how they had harassed their brother before. As they reached this conclusion, the Tana twins made up their minds. We haven't made any mistakes. Daytona gathered his courage and answered. Siren propped his chin on his hand, as if he were waiting for his son to finish speaking. Jean used some unknown power to punch Daytona and me. That's right. He used a power that wasn't aura. Daytona intervened as he accentuated the second half of his sentence. A power that wasn't aura. In this world, there could only be one answer when it came to a power that wasn't aura. Magic. If the 7-year-old Jean had used aura in order to beat them, he would have been praised by the others. However, it was an entirely different case if it were magic. A child with Runkandle blood using magic was blasphemy. Therefore, the Tana twins were trying to convey the fact that Jean had used magic to defeat them. My sons. A gentle tone resounded. Yes, father. The twins answered brightly, as if they were criminals who had found a loophole to take advantage of. Realizing that their father's voice was gentle, they believed that they had a chance to seize victory. However, Siren completely ignored the Tana twins' excuse and spoke in a mellow voice. I shall give you two a piece of advice that you should engrave in your hearts. If you keep behaving like this, you will never survive within the Runkandle clan. We apologize, father. Go call Jean for me. As he walked down the hallway, Jean thought about the Tana twins who had come to fetch him. They were completely shriveled up and looked close to collapsing, as if they had fallen into a beast's cage and had barely escaped with their lives. I used to wear the same expression in my previous life whenever I met up with father. I can imagine what those two went through. Jean hadn't heard the conversation between the twins and Siren, but he had an idea about what had been discussed. Father most likely asked them a question, and the twins weren't able to give him a satisfying answer. Well, it's understandable since they're still kids. That was how Siren educated his children. No, it couldn't even qualify as education. Despite having 13 children, Siren never raised a single child himself. The people who raised the children within the Runkandle clan were the nannies. All Siren and Rosa did was observe their children. They observed how their children grew up, and tried to determine which one of them was most worthy of leading the clan after their father. Furthermore, they would slowly get involved with their children only after they grew into adults and showed results exceeding the Runkandle standard. Therefore, Siren's arrival at the Storm Castle had become a huge deal. The other siblings waiting in the lobby were dying to know what was occurring inside the throne room. Step. Jean could finally see the throne. His father was seated, waiting for him to arrive. He carefully walked toward Siren as the events in his past life flashed through his head. My father. The strongest person I've ever seen, yet also the cruelest I've known. His mother, Rosa Runkandle, somewhat had a humane aspect to her. When Jean was kicked out of the clan, the news that she refused to eat anything for 2 days had spread around the world. Nonetheless, she ended up erasing the existence known as Jean from her heart entirely after a few days. However, Siren was different. He still had some human aspects to him, such as twitching his brows when he got angry or slightly smiling when he found something entertaining. Jean had also heard that when Siren was younger and hadn't become the patriarch yet, he could get frustrated, happy, and also struggled for his life. However, when he reached the demigod realm and became the Genesis Knight, those emotions slowly faded away. All that was left within him was an unconditional concern for the clan. It's a funny story. Even though he's reached the demigod realm, he's still protecting the clan as eldest brother hasn't taken over. Jean was clenching his teeth so hard he could hear them grinding. He had lived a miserable life in the clan until he got banished. Even when they ate at the same dinner table, the other clan members treated him like heir. However, he couldn't continue acting like this. Siren would definitely notice it. There's no way he wouldn't realize his youngest son was grinding his teeth as soon as he saw him. He may be my father, but I'll make sure he can't look down on me in this life. Jean knelt before Siren as he vowed this to himself, and greeted him. Greetings to the patriarch. He was behaving like the adults of the clan who had long since departed the storm castle. He was welcoming Siren not as his youngest son, but as a member of the clan. Siren nodded in satisfaction and spoke to his son. Why did you call me patriarch instead of father? Jean pretended to ponder for a while. He had already predicted Siren's reaction to his greeting. My elder brothers, elder sisters, and the guardian knights numbering over 100 returned to this castle to welcome you. So I inferred that the patriarch's visit to the castle was a formal one. Siren's eyes widened. Excellent. Jean didn't respond to his father's exclamation and slightly lowered his head to show his gratitude. While it was unthinkable for a 7-year-old to show such impressive manners, Siren didn't suspect anything. He merely believed that Gilly had educated Jean properly and that his son had a keen insight, just like how he had selected Barasada during the ritual. However, Jean wasn't a genuine 7-year-old. He had the mind of an adult from his past life. Siren was unaware of that fact, despite having reached the demigod realm. As he gazed at his son vacantly, Siren spoke once again. Just now, I asked your brothers what mistake they had made. They weren't able to answer my question. Yes, patriarch. However, I feel like I should try asking you that same question. So, what mistake did Daytona and Haytona make? Once again, Jean pretended to think to himself. He had somewhat foreseen the conversation developing in this direction. No. In fact, he had completely predicted this outcome because Siren Runcandle would not hesitate to treat his sick children like war veterans who had been through countless hardships. The answer Siren wanted to hear had already been decided from the beginning. It's revenge. Siren's wide eyes glinted in astonishment. As he sat quietly for a few seconds, Jean explained his previous answer. My brothers should have tried to get revenge on me. A Runcandle must always repay one's dues to another, whether it be a favor or a grudge. Silence ensued. Jean was certain that this lack of reaction from his father was synonymous to satisfaction. However, he now had to show a childish attitude to eliminate any suspicion Siren could have. He raised his head ever so slightly with a worried gaze, and asked his father. Was my answer incorrect? No. On the contrary, it was extremely satisfactory. Thank you, patriarch. At his son's words, Siren showed hints of sadness in his eyes. You may call me father for now. Our clan members may have gathered at this castle to welcome me, but my visit here is purely for personal reasons. Yes, father. Siren faintly smiled as he looked down at his son. In the blink of an eye, all signs of contentment disappeared from his face. As his aloof and indifferent expression returned, Siren asked his son another question. What is this special power you use to defeat your brothers? Chapter 4. Stormy Days at the Castle, 3, you are listening at novelfull.audio. I do not know either. Jean responded in a calm tone. You don't know. Siren raised his head. He hadn't expected this reply from his clever son, who had been giving satisfactory answers all this time. Yes, father. This power isn't aura, so I'm not sure what I should call it. Once again, the flow of the conversation had been predicted by Jean. He had shown a childlike innocence on purpose, just like he had done earlier. Swoosh! The sound of flames swirling resounded. Jean had generated a handful of dark energy atop his palm. It was the power he had used to pummel the Tawna twins. He had gained this power, spiritual power, through his contract with Sodaret, the god of shadows. Despite acting like an ignorant child, Jean knew better than anyone what this power was. He also knew that Siren would recognize this power. May I request Father to give this power a name? Jean looked up to Siren with twinkling eyes. Siren's jaw dropped for the first time since he reached the demigod realm and became a Genesis Knight. Lord Sodaret, he finally managed to shut his mouth. As he stared at his son's palm, Siren gulped. Could it be that this child was the reincarnation of the clan's founder and first patriarch? Such questions went through his mind as Siren thought to himself. Sodaret, the god of shadows. A being that all the magicians of the world yearn for. However, Siren and Jean were both aware of a different truth. Originally, Sodaret didn't specialize in magic, but was something akin to a god of swords. Moreover, 1,000 years ago, he had made a contract with the clan's founder and had protected the Runcandles for years. I thought that he had abandoned the clan ever since the founder passed away, but it seems that he has taken an interest in my youngest child. Could this be a sign that the Runcandles could once again rise and prosper in the future? No, it was also possible that the god who had once abandoned them had returned on a whim, and would soon leave again. Siren began to calculate the possibilities as he watched the shadows dance upon Jin's palm. I'm certain that he hasn't made a contract with the god yet. If he had gained this power through the contract, there's no way he wouldn't know what power this is. Jean could easily guess the thoughts passing through his father's mind. He started getting somewhat nervous as everything had gone according to his plan. It was far too easy. He believed that Siren would show some suspicions at some moment, but that moment never came. Maybe it was because of his young age and childish appearance. 7 years of age was an excellent period to lie and trick people. My son. Siren had finished sorting out his thoughts. Yes, father. That is the power of a god named Sodaret. Therefore, I cannot name it. Lord Sodaret is one of the secrets our clan has kept hidden for a long time. Sodaret, it is the being who brought about shadows in this world. You may be a clever child, but you're still too young to understand this. Is he? When Jean paused, Siren nodded to urge him to continue. Is God Sodaret stronger than father? Huh, Siren let out an awkward laugh signifying his defeat. He had never laughed like this ever since becoming a demigod. Having devoted his time and energy to his training for countless years now, his emotions and spirit had been stirred for the first time in a long time. I wonder. Your father has never attempted to challenge gods, so I cannot say. Truly a prideful reply. Not knowing the answer for never having battled gods. Nonetheless, Jean shuddered as he listened to his father's reply. The person in question was Siren Runcandle. The strongest man on the continent. Even the clanmaster of the Zipfel clan, Keliark Zipfel, could not hold a candle to this man. Smirk. Siren showed a toothy grin. I've truly made the correct decision to come and meet you today. Your naive question has become a great topic of interest for me. Thank you, my son. Come closer. Could he win against a god? Siren had called this question a topic of interest. Once Jean walked up to him, his father lightly patted his head. The handful of shadow was still swirling on Jin's palm right now. How do you want to use this power? I want to use it for the clan, father. I want to use it for myself. There was no need for him to answer honestly. The only things the clan had given Jean in his past life was scorn and contempt. He had never felt the warmth called family again after turning 7 years old. Therefore, Jean had absolutely no intention of using his life to serve the clan, unless he somehow became the patriarch of the family. However, in order to do that, he would have to defeat his monstrously powerful siblings. Kohaha. Siren suddenly burst into laughter. The echoes resounded throughout the entire storm castle and shook the ground. The siblings waiting outside the throne room all jolted in surprise. They had never heard their father laugh so vigorously in recent years. After a while, the laughter subsided and Siren turned expressionless as usual. He bent down and brought his face up close to Jin's. What an amusing lie. You can be more honest with your father, you know. Jin hadn't expected this situation. Nevertheless, he suppressed his shock and slowly spoke. For me. I want to use it for myself. Right. After having pummeled your brothers and leaving them out in the storm, there's no way you'd use your power for the clan. I'll be watching over you from here on out. Siren walked past Jin and left the room. After his father's footsteps disappeared into the distance, Jin finally noticed the cold sweat running down his face and back. A mixture of disbelief and relief painted across his face. Phew. He let out a large breath of air and wiped his sweat with his sleeve. He had never faced his father in such a bold manner during his past 28 years of life. I did it. I made it. As the adrenaline rush subsided, he could finally hear his heart beating like crazy. Through today's conversation with his father, Jin had obtained Siren's approval to use Sodaret's power freely, and his father's expectations of him were high. In my first life, I ended up dying without getting the chance to properly use Sodaret's power, and I never would have thought that father would hold expectations for me back then. Even after getting banished from the clan, Jin did not have the liberty of using Sodaret's power freely. The clan wouldn't allow a banished Runcandle to gain power and potentially use it against them. Therefore, Jin had to hide in the Akin Kingdom and train in secrecy. The Akin Kingdom was affiliated to the Lutero Magic Federation, which was under the Zipful clan's influence. It was the perfect place for Jin to hide, as he was technically a magician back then. The Runcandle clan's long-time secret. The founder's contract with Sodaret. Jin was already aware of this undisclosed information before his rebirth. Siren had called it a secret the clan had kept hidden for a long time, but Jin was more knowledgeable about the details of the founder's relation with Sodaret than his father. Sodaret had told Jin about his history with the Runcandle clan personally after their contract was made. At that time, Sodaret and Jin would chat amicably like two close friends. But he never told me why he left the Runcandles and became a god of magic instead of the god of swords. He didn't get involved during my death either. Moreover, ever since his rebirth, Sodaret hadn't spoken to him once. Jin speculated that his rebirth was a phenomenon that had transpired due to Sodaret's power and authority, but that was merely a hypothesis. When Jin was 1 year old, he realized that the power he had obtained through the contract was still available to him. It became usable immediately after I selected Barisada. On his selection day, during the night after the ritual was over, a 9-star magician's curse, the bladed illusion, was cast on Jin. It was the same curse as his past life. The incident was repeating itself. Contractor, it seems that someone bore a grudge against you since your childhood. You haven't been able to use your full potential due to a trivial curse. That might have been the reason why I was so captivated by you. Those were Sodaret's words right after they had made their contract. As Jin remembered that conversation, he watched the curse's chains slowly crawl into his cradle. While he was fully conscious, he couldn't resist or block the curse with the body of a 1-year-old. He began blaming his newborn body for his powerlessness. He could neither resist the curse slithering towards him, nor call out for help. Suddenly, Sodaret's power manifested itself. The chains never managed to reach Jin, and disappeared into his shadow. Curses of this level could not affect Sodaret's contractor. Using his past life's magic teacher's expression, it was an extremely cheat-like effect. Just you wait. I don't know who cast this curse on me, but once I've grown up, I will find you. And I will kill you. The power to control shadows, his knowledge of magic he gained in his past life, and, despite having unlocked and practiced it belatedly, his skills and talent with the sword. Jean had retained all these qualities through the reincarnation. He would not face the same fate as last time. The clan would not banish him for not having any talents this time. An entirely different future was awaiting him. Young master. Yes, Nanny Gilly. As he turned around, Gilly was waiting for him at the entrance. The patriarch has announced his departure. You must come to see him off. Okay. But, are you all right? Gilly asked in concern. She had seen the Tana twins returning to their rooms with ashen white faces and expressions of terror, therefore she couldn't hide her worries for Jean. I'm okay. Are my elder brothers and sisters leaving as well? Yes. They only came here to greet the patriarch. Ah. But Lady Mary has left behind a gift for you, young master. I'll open the gift later. I should go see father off first. There were over 200 guardian knights who had turned up at the storm castle, accompanying their respective Runcandle flag bearers. As Siren was preparing to leave again, the others had no reason to stay. Once they would leave, Jean could ignore the Tana twins and spend his days quietly at the storm castle here on out. Spend his days quietly gaining strength without anyone noticing, in fact. All hail! All hail! The knights raised their swords to the sky as Siren exited the gates. Jean and the Tana twins stood next to them and bowed their heads as well. The next time I see father will be at the main house instead of the storm castle. Siren returned to the direction of the Black Sea. The people who were expecting Siren to lead them to a bloody battle against the Zipful clan all hid their disappointment deep in their hearts. The Runcandle flag bearers each returned to their original whereabouts, followed by their guardian knights. Siren never returned to the storm castle again until Jean turned 10 and left. However, the guardian knight called Khan would occasionally leave for the Black Sea in order to inform the patriarch about Jin's recent actions. Elder sister Mary isn't in her right mind. I'm still only 7 years old. Ha ha ha. To think she'd give me such an amazing present. Jean shouted out in his mind as he opened the gift in his room. Gilly's eyes also turned wide as she checked the item left behind by Jin's third sister, Mary. Before their eyes was the heart of a beast summoned by a magician from the Zipful clan. Mary had personally killed the summoned beast in the continent's southern region. A phoenix heart. A rare and precious gift Jean never received in his previous life. Mary was wishing for his well-being and wanted her youngest brother to grow up strong and healthy. Jean could now decoct the heart and consume it. Chapter 5. Stormy Days at the Castle. 4. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Jin's third sister, Mary Runcandle. Currently aged 19, she is known around the world as Stormwind Mary. In the Runcandle clan's thousand-year-old history, not a single child failed to become a 1-star knight before reaching 14. By 16, most would be 3-star knights, and the average would become a 5-star before the age of 20. Mary's case was the complete opposite of the past Jean. She exceeded the Runcandle clan's norm. While Jean became a 1-star knight at 25 years old, she achieved the same feat at 12 and was already a 5-star knight at 16. Moreover, she was currently a 6-star knight. Despite not being 20 yet, she reached a stage that most people around the world could only dream of attaining. By exceeding the Runcandle norm, the word genius that applied to all Runcandles could no longer do justice to her and her achievements. Regardless of her talents, Mary was one of the few people who had shown goodwill and compassion towards Jean in his previous life. She may have a screw or two loose in her head, but she's given me an incredible gift. I was just starting to get frustrated by my slow growth speed. 1 month has passed since Siren left the Storm Castle. During that time, the smell of the phoenix heart being decocted in the kitchen had spread throughout the entire castle. Moreover, several corridors and halls near the kitchen were scorching due to the special heat released by the phoenix heart. Despite all this havoc, Mary had returned to the southern region as if the heart was insignificant to her. Normally speaking, a phoenix heart was a rarity similar to an elixir that even kings and queens couldn't eat often. The meat was tender and softer than veal, it had a richer fragrance than truffles, and its effects were far more potent than herbal tonics. Young master, within a couple of hours, you'll finally be able to eat the heart. Good job waiting patiently until now. Jean nodded excitedly as his eyes glimmered. It had taken Mary's gift a month to be fully cooked. Gilly hadn't been able to sleep properly during this entire month because she was busy simmering the phoenix heart for her young master. Nevertheless, she was ecstatic. Jin's happiness was her happiness. A nanny within this clan was responsible for a Runcandle child's growth, and their future depended greatly on how strong and dependable the child became. Due to this tradition, Jean felt guilt-ridden towards Gilly. In his previous life, his nanny's life had taken a turn for the worse after his banishment from the clan. Her future was bleak and her lifestyle had completely crumbled. You may not be aware, young master, but the phoenix heart is an elixir that is especially effective on children. You can increase your tolerance against flames only by eating it at a young age. Lady Mary has given you a truly priceless gift. Really? Jean was far more knowledgeable about the heart than Gilly, but he pretended to be interested by her explanation. He had studied about the phoenix heart endlessly during the years when he was training his magic. However, I didn't do research on it back then because I wanted to eat one, but because I wanted to learn the traits of a phoenix as a magician. Summoning a phoenix was every magician's dream. But Jean had died right before becoming a 6-star magician, the stage at which one can finally summon the bird in question. Of course. I hid your eyes when I first saw the puddle of blood inside the box, but once I realized it was the priceless product that even the Vermont imperial family couldn't easily obtain, as Gilly continued her lengthy commentary, Jean began to think about phoenixes. He couldn't wait until he could finally summon one during this life. Learning magic as a Runcandle was strictly prohibited, but Jean had no intentions of giving up on it. As long as he didn't get caught, everything would work out. Moreover, if he gained unparalleled power or influence, or if he had a good enough justification, then it wouldn't matter even if he did get discovered. Martial arts and magic. A lifestyle and path that encompassed both of those aspects. The magic swordsman. In order to become a magic swordsman, Jean was prepared to shoulder any hardships. If it were me, I would never have let my enemies steal and eat my phoenix's heart. Phoenixes were immortal beings that would be reborn even after death. Even if one were killed by an enemy and had its heart stolen, it would revive 100 years later in nature. Nevertheless, 100 years was a long period of time. The phoenix's original summoner would have died by then. You mustn't forget to thank Lady Mary the next time you see her, young master. Yeah, I won't. The phoenix heart was ready. A strong and rich fragrance began to spread throughout the castle. I must go prepare your meal, so come down in a little while, young master. Gilly exited the room, humming and skipping in joy as the door remained ajar. Once she left his field of vision, a deep sigh escaped Jin's mouth. Stop loitering around me. It's annoying. Okay. Sure, that the Tawna twins had been dawdling outside the room since a while ago. Once Gilly had left, they stood by the entrance, close to the door, and shot glances towards their youngest brother. Jean let out a light snicker when he noticed the twins drooling from the smell. Geez, look at these cute, little brats. When he gestured them to get closer with his finger, the Tawna twins dashed inside the room. Why are you here? Jean asked them coldly despite knowing full well that they were here for the phoenix heart. The Tawna twins were squirming awkwardly, as if they desperately needed to head to the bathroom. They wanted to ask Jean to share some of the phoenix heart, but were too afraid to do so. The beating from last month and their father's scolding had traumatized them. Jean found this situation quite entertaining. In his previous life, the Tana twins would always steal something from him or beat him up if he bumped into them in the hallways. He could never have imagined that they'd be the ones being cautious of him now. They were probably ordered by Emma to convince me to share some phoenix heart with them. Emma Niltro. Just like Gilly, she was a nanny living in the Storm Castle. She was in charge of the Tana twins' growth. However, unlike Gilly who had died a gruesome death during Jin's first life, Emma had been living lavishly thanks to the well-off Tana twins. Despite becoming crazed murderers, Daytona and Haytona never forgot about Emma and took good care of her. But that was all part of her plan. If Gilly was the type to raise children with love and affection, Emma was the type to raise them using the carrot and stick approach. She never taught the Tana twins concepts such as selflessness or morality. Truth be told, both of those concepts weren't very useful in the Runcandle clan, as one's enemies could take advantage of them. But Jean still believed that Emma's teachings were distorted. She was the biggest influence upon the Tana twins' upbringing, and was the cause of their twisted characters. You see, the phoenix, that, isn't there, a bit too much to eat, on your own. What was that? I can't hear you. The phoenix heart soup. Could you share a bowl with us? Otherwise, we'll get scolded by Emma. Do us a favor, brother. Seems like they're more afraid of Emma than me. Jean snickered as he thought to himself. I don't want to. Please, we're begging you. The Tana twins were on the verge of crying, but Jean had not a speck of sympathy for them within his heart. Jean already knew that the Tonas were used to the carrot and stick approach, so he planned on making them do some physically exhausting work in return for the phoenix heart soup. If you're willing to go that far, then I won't refuse. But I have a condition. Oh, what is it? What is it? Remember that grave I made. The Tana twins shuddered and turned pale at the word grave. The memories of being pummeled and left out in the rainstorm in front of the grave had resurfaced. If you look carefully, there's a small hole behind that grave. A hole. Yeah. Like a burrow. I want you two to dig into that hole and make it deeper. You have until nightfall. Of course, you can't rest at all. The task Jean had given to his 9-year-old brothers was, quite literally, a waste of time. Why do we need to dig there? I want to bury the bird you two killed in a deeper hole and give it a better grave. The twins lost strength in their legs and felt them wobble. However, if they didn't have to face their terrifying brother in another fight, and could eat the phoenix heart soup with such a trifling task, then they had no complaints. How deep do we need to dig? I told you to dig until nightfall with no rest, didn't I? All right. So if we dig until then, you'll share some phoenix heart soup with us. Of course I will. But you need to do your best. If I'm not satisfied by the depth of the hole, this agreement is invalid. Oh, by the way, there are plenty of shovels in the warehouse. You should use those. Sure. And this is pretty obvious, but you can't order someone else to dig for you, all right? The twins nodded vigorously and immediately departed to begin their work. While the Tana twins were shoveling in the backyard, Jean was eating the phoenix heart soup at the dinner table. Is it that tasty, young master? Gilly asked as she watched Jean gleefully slurping down the meal. She thought that Jean was joyful because of the delicious soup. Yeah, it's so tasty. There's more than enough to last you for 3 days, so don't hesitate to ask if you want another serving. With each spoonful going down his throat, Jean could feel his bones and skin becoming sturdy. If he ate the soup for 3 days, his affinity and resistance against fire would increase substantially. However, Jean wasn't smiling from ear to ear because of the phoenix heart. Within a few days, I'll have access to the secret tomes. The spot where the Tana twins were digging, behind the bird's grave. Despite being only 9 years old, the twins' physical abilities were still far above the world's average as they were of the Runcandle bloodline. The run candles had special bodies as if they had been blessed by the heavens. So if the twins continued digging until nightfall using their blessed bodies, the hole would reach the underground wall. They won't be able to tell if it's a wall or just a hard boulder, though. Below the storm castle was a secret underground area where some of the Runcandle clan's wrongdoings were hidden. The secret tomes of other clans. The Runcandles had subdued and destroyed other clans throughout their history. During these wars, they would steal their enemies' secret books, scrolls, and records. It goes without saying that Jean wouldn't be able to easily infiltrate the underground area just because the Tana twins dug until the wall. He would have to deal with the two protective installations that repelled outsiders first. But Jean already knew how to disable them. He had technically lived in the Runcandle clan for 25 years during his previous life, despite being treated worse than bugs. He had picked up some information and a few tricks here and there within the clan. I'll just study those books until the day I leave the storm castle. Jean had emptied 2 bowls of soup for dinner. Nanny Gilly. Yes, young master. Could you share some of the phoenix heart soup with the twins when night falls? Ah, how much should I give them? 1 spoonful each. 0.1 spoonful. Why bother sharing some with them in that case? You should eat it all on your own instead. I must keep my promise. If they complain about it and ask for more, tell them I said this. I'll show you how kind and gentle Emma is compared to me. Gilly smiled awkwardly as she bowed to him. Young Master Jean. Has the ruthlessness of the clan already started to affect him? He's still too young to be acting like this. As her wry smile turned into a bitter expression, Jean cuddled into Gilly's embrace. Elder Sister Mary gave me the heart for my sake, and Gilly carefully prepared the soup for an entire month with dozens of sleepless nights. I don't want to share such a precious meal with those idiots. Young Master, SHCRRT, SHCRRT. Despite being drenched from the rain, the twins continued shoveling the earth. They reached the underground wall around midnight, which was when they finally stopped digging. 1 spoon. 1 spoonful only. That's just unfair. We dug the ground for the entire day. The Tana twins belatedly realized that they hadn't decided upon a proper amount during their agreement with Jean, and were enraged by their so-called reward. However, they couldn't voice out their frustrations for too long, as Jean glared at them, as if to tell them to savor the spoonful gratefully. You brats! If one could earn a spoonful of phoenix heart soup with 1 day of shoveling, most people around the world would come running to me. Jean truly believed that the twins should be extremely grateful to receive a spoonful of the soup from him. Chapter 6. Stormy Days at the Castle, 5. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next morning, Jean went to the hole the Tana twins had dug. It appeared that the twins hadn't resorted to petty tricks. They had dug the hole quite seriously. Inside the deep hole, Jean could see a goldish stone wall on the side at the bottom. Currently, there were 7 guardian knights, 2 nannies and a dozen servants at the castle. Of course, the Tana twins were here as well. Nobody would come here looking for Jean or suspect him of scheming something. Telling them that I wanted to come here to pray for the dead bird was a pretty good excuse. Recently, the members of the Runcandle clan residing at the Storm Castle were wary of Jean. The youngest child of the patriarch did not behave like a young child, and was eerily mature. In fact, some were more than just wary. Many were afraid of the 7-year-old boy. The servants gossiped about him, saying that he was a perfect copy of his cold-hearted father, and the guardian knights obeyed him as if he were their superior. But when Jean said that he would go pray for the bird, they were all relieved. They thought that despite being Siren Runcandle's son, a child is still a child. I pray that you'll find happiness in your next life. Jean hadn't lied when he said he would pray for the bird. He truly did pity it. Once he finished moving the bird's grave to the bottom of the deep hole the twins had dug, Jean approached the stone wall on the side. There were scratches made by the shovels on its surface. The wall itself wasn't very solid. There weren't any metal bars or wires inside to increase its durability, so Jean could easily destroy it with a punch wrapped in shadows. However, breaking it like that would definitely create a loud explosion. The constant rain outside would somewhat muffle the sound, but the 7-star knights in the castle would most likely catch the noise. Ha ha ha. Jean suddenly laughed as he couldn't hold himself back. He then spread out his arms and placed his hands against the wall. Immediately, the stone wall began to vibrate ever so slightly. Room. It was the 1-star earth magic spell, Earth Resonance. Earth Resonance was a spell that magicians often used while camping outside or exploring the wild, but its lethality was 9.0. I've been dying to use magic. The practicality and pleasure of using magic. He hadn't felt this liberating sensation for the past 7 years. Because he had retained his memories and knowledge from his past life, being unable to use magic since he was born was like a punishment to Jean. Magic, a magician's strength. When he first realized he had been reborn, Jean wondered how he should start learning magic and store mana again. However, his worries were unfounded. Just like how Soderet's power was still available to him, the mana he had amassed during his previous life was also accessible in this new life. The only issue is that there's a limit to the amount of mana I can use right now because of my immature body. But it's better than nothing. In his past life, Jean was about to reach the 6-star realm in magic after training for 3 years. Currently, the amount of mana Jean could utilize was equivalent to that of a 1-star magician, but it would increase over time as he grew up. Every time he aged by another year, he could feel more mana generating within him. Moreover, it was a natural occurrence. Jean hadn't been training to increase his mana or anything. Therefore, he came to the conclusion that the mana he had accumulated in his past life was slowly returning to him over the years. The mana of a 1-star magician at 7 years old. I'm certain that no one else in history managed to achieve this feat at this pace. I'll reach 6-star before I turn 20 at the latest. His second life was incomparably preferable and advantageous compared to his first one. He was ecstatic and overjoyed right now. At the young age of 7, Jean could utilize both spiritual power and mana, along with the knowledge and expertise in 3-star swordsmanship and 5-star magic. Furthermore, he could now study the secret tomes of countless martial clans around the world that the Runcandle clan plundered from. His motivation was at its peak currently, and it would not die down for a long while. I truly am a magician down to the core. I never thought I'd be so delighted to use a simple spell like Earth Resonance. The times he could use magic within the Runcandle clan was extremely limited. One could even say that until this moment, Jean had no other opportunities to use magic. There were almost no instances when Jean was on his own without anyone accompanying him. Gilly would always be with him, and in the rare cases when she wasn't present, the guardian knights and servants would be by his side. And if, by some miracle, none of them were next to Jean, the Tawna twins would come bother him. Therefore, Jean never had the chance to use magic. There were also no moments when he would have no other choice but to resort to magic. Even though Jean could now push the twins around like his servants, he could not afford to use magic and get busted by them. If word spread to his parents or older siblings that Jean had used magic, his pleasant new life would immediately come to a close at that exact moment. I should seal away my magic for a while after today. Can't afford to get caught. But one day, I'll find a way to use as much magic as I want. Just you wait. As he licked his lips in anticipation, Jean once again focused on his hands placed against the wall. The sensation of having mana flow through his hands and fingers, and spread throughout the wall sent shivers down his spine. SSSSSSSSST. And so, 10 minutes passed by quietly. Earth resonance's vibrations silently created dozens of cracks and fissures on the wall. Dirt and dust fell down heavily, as if the stone wall would soon collapse. KRRT. As a matter of fact, the center of the wall where Jin's hands were located crumbled into fine particles. A small hole appeared, where Jin could barely squeeze his body through. The child stared into the sight beyond the wall for a short instant. There was an old, long hallway, as if he were in some ancient ruins, along with a large steel gate in the distance. It would be a mistake to think that the Runcandle clan's secret underground room could be so easily broken into. The Storm Castle was a fortress that even the Zipful clan's elite troops wouldn't be able to easily conquer. Jin was just lucky as he was a member of the Runcandle clan who was residing within the said castle. So this is the secret underground sector that only the Runcandle flag-bearers can enter. Interesting layout. Flag-bearers, they were the clan's representatives who stood on the front lines, waving the clan's emblem. All the children of the Runcandle clan became flag-bearers when they reached a certain level, barring the few exceptions like the previous Jin who was deemed incompetent. Jin had heard countless stories about this underground room from his siblings. He, who could only imagine the wonders hiding inside, could finally see it with his own eyes. Jin slightly choked up, as if something deep within his heart had surfaced. I didn't think it would affect me this much, but seeing it for myself, my emotions reacted subconsciously. Phew. After exhaling and calming down, Jin squeezed himself into the hole. Back in the pit the twins had dug, he could hear the constant downpour crashing onto the ground, but as soon as he entered the underground corridor, the noise completely disappeared. With a solemn heart, Jin removed his shoes. He couldn't leave behind traces of mud in the corridor. The path was dimly lit by a few torches on the walls, where oil dripped down. Jin was about to create a flame with magic to illuminate the place, but decided to grab one of the torches instead. Walking down a worn-down corridor barefoot with a torch in hand, he felt like he had become a monk. Mother used to tell me that before reaching that door, the Runcandle children need to prove that they're part of the bloodline. Jin remembered hearing that when he was around 16. Back then, Rosa still believed that her youngest child would one day become a respectable member of the clan. She could not accept the fact that her child was untalented, and held distorted expectations towards him. Rosa had secretly broken the clan rules in order to give Jin confidential information, despite the fact that he wasn't a genius like his siblings. She wanted to believe that Jin would one day become a 6-star knight and receive the qualifications of a flag-bearer. Rosa Runcandle, the Black Panther, was one of the strongest people in the clan and the world. However, the reason why she couldn't have an objective view and judgment towards Jin was simply because she was a mother. His mother. Even so, she ended up facing and accepting the reality later on. Jin stopped reminiscing about the past and paused his walk towards the metal door. He was at the center of the corridor. There were still around 50 steps left until he reached the gate. Runcandles and magic. Pfft. Jin couldn't help but chuckle when he noticed the magic circle on the floor. It was a large magic circle, but even apprentice magicians could easily analyze it. The magic circle of blood and barrier. It was a popular magic circle one could often find at the entrances to kingdoms, or inside a businessman's warehouse, or at a famous mercenary group's headquarters. Despite its impressive and grand name, it was a basic circle. It was no different to a simple security device. All it could do was determine whether someone would pose a threat through one's blood. Those magic-hating clan members actually laid down a magic circle in front of the clan's secret chamber. Not only that, it's such a flimsy circle. Jin bit down on the inside of his cheek. A trail of blood seeped out of his mouth and ran down his chin. Before it could drop on the floor, Jin caught the blood with his hand. Drip, drip. All he needed was a few drops in order to activate the magic circle of blood and barrier. As he shook off the blood on his hands onto the circle, a blue aura began to fill the air from all four directions. Proof that we're part of the bloodline. What a joke. Jean was curious to know which of his ancestors was stupid enough to place this magic circle here. This magic circle wasn't elaborate enough to be able to verify someone's bloodline and lineage. In fact, Jean wasn't sure if such magic existed in the first place. There were only 3 things this magic circle could determine. It could detect whether the blood was that of a monster, a human, or a plague-stricken human. In other words, as long as they're able to reach this underground corridor, any healthy human is able to activate this magic circle safely. The magic circle was completely useless, except for how it added an air of mystery to this ancient, hidden chamber. They believe in that weird superstition called the selection ritual. They also believe that this magic circle is able to recognize a pure-blooded runcandle. This clan is quite peculiar. Very peculiar. Clang. Clang. Kriawak. With the circle's activation, Jean could hear gears and metallic parts grinding and moving beneath the floor. The circle was stopping the trap's operation, the traps that would have attacked Jean if he didn't activate the magic circle. He silently stood still and waited for the noise to subside. There are quite a lot of traps. I don't know the specifics, but the traps here are more elaborate than those found in a royal palace. The magic circle soon began to dim down, and lost its luster. The traps had all been disabled. Jean resumed his march and headed towards the door. He had safely dealt with one of the security systems of the Storm Castle's secret chamber. The remaining one was to safely open the door. But that was even easier to do than activating the magic circle. Runcandle's descendant has come to solace Murakan. Creak. The gate began to slide open as soon as Jean uttered the password. It was another type of barrier magic similar to the magic circle just now, but was on a completely different level. It was a spell cast by a great dragon, who has since fallen into a deep slumber. The password deactivates the spell, but without the correct words, the door will never budge open. That was the potency of this barrier magic. One would have to be at least a 9-star knight in order to break the door open. I heard the password from my second brother before my rebirth, though he was being sarcastic, saying that it would never be of use to me. The Storm Castle's location. Mt. Murakan Summit. The name Murakan did not signify the mountain in the first place. It was the name of the black dragon who once reigned over this region. Murakan was defeated 1,000 years ago by the first Runcandle Patriarch, and went into a deep slumber after handing over the Storm Castle. This story was the most popular legend of the Runcandle clan, known to everyone around the world. The first thing Jean saw when the door opened wasn't a shelf with countless books, but a glass coffin. Inside the glass coffin was a human body. It was Murakan who had transformed into a human before entering a deep slumber. Nobody told me about this, ba-dump, ba-dump. Having come across an unexpected sight, Jin's body froze in surprise and unease. He then slowly began approaching the glass coffin. Chapter 7. Black Dragon Murakan, 1, you are listening at novelfull.audio. I remember hearing the story that the Black Dragon Murakan was defeated by the first Patriarch and fell into a deep slumber. So he was sleeping here. Jean didn't know a lot about Murakan. The legends and myths of the clan rarely mentioned him. They just didn't care much about a dragon that had long since disappeared into the annals of history. The currently active dragons were more worrisome and troubling. The glass coffin was sparkling clean, without a single speck of dust on its surface. But it wasn't being cleaned every day by a maid. The spotlessness was due to the mana surrounding the coffin. Jean touched the mana with one hand, and chills immediately ran down his spine. As he swallowed his saliva, Jean took another step forward. That was an interesting sight. There was nothing Jean could learn from Murakan. If it were an awake and active dragon, things would have been different. But Murakan was a hibernating dragon inside a coffin, so Jean was more interested in finding the secret tomes. This place is bigger than I thought. The underground chamber seemed larger than the central hall at the Storm Castle. However, it felt empty as there were no decorations furbishing the place. Jean quickly began searching for the tomes. Creak. He pushed open the sliding door and located the library. Actually, it was far too shabby to be called a library. The Runcandle secret library only contained one bookshelf and a few chairs. However, that was more than enough space to house the secret tomes. There could only be so many books written by other martial clans around the world. The library would have no use of extra shelves. The tomes. On the 1.50-meter wide shelf were dusty books arranged neatly. These books had once been written and used by martial clans around the world, and tried to protect them with their lives on the line. These were the essence of the martial clans that only the flag bearers could read. Jean calmed down his trembling heart and began checking the names on each of the books on the shelf. The hand-to-hand combat techniques of the Meyer clan and Typhon clan, spear techniques of the Euron clan and Shagal clan, swordsmanship from the Attila clan, etc. There are so many of them. Jean also found a few books from the Kungan clan, the clan of swordsmen that had attacked the Storm Castle around 200 years ago. Jin's hands were trembling ever so slightly as he checked the tomes one by one. His excitement was overflowing. In his first life, he had always wished to become a flag-bearer and come down here to read the secret tomes. Now that he was finally here, the memories of his hardships and despair flashed through his mind. Of course, he hadn't come down to the underground chamber as a flag-bearer this time. Despite having the Runcandle family name, he was no different to a thief who had infiltrated the library. However, Jean didn't care about those small details. Using whatever methods at hand was part of the Runcandle's virtue. Moreover, he was planning on officially coming to this underground chamber in a few years after becoming a true flag-bearer. Which one should I start with? What a first-world problem. He was spoiled for choice. Jean wondered whether his older brothers felt this way when they were secretly reading porn books when their nannies were away. Jean chuckled as he scanned the books before him. He didn't have a lot of time to remain down here. 2 hours. The free time he had obtained through the excuse of wanting to pray for the bird was a mere 2 hours. After this amount of time, Gilly would most probably come to the castle's backyard in order to look for him. It was as if Jean had a mountain of food before him, but could only eat for a few minutes. But I'll have another opportunity. I can come back here another day if I tell them I want to pray for the bird again or that I want to meditate. Ist. He pulled out a book from the shelf. Jin's first secret tome was the Kungan clan's book of swordsmanship. Third brother once told me that there is a lot to learn from this tome. Let's start with this. There were a total of 3 volumes of the Kungan clan's secret tomes. Jean also picked out the remaining 2 volumes and sat on a chair. Originally, the Kungan clan's secret tomes numbered over 10. But when the Runcandles destroyed the clan 200 years ago, most of them were lost during the conflict. The Runcandle clan had destroyed them intentionally. However, the 3 volumes in his hands were left untouched. These tomes summarized the essence of the Kungan swordsmanship's greatest techniques. Flutter, flutter. The sound of pages turning accelerated. Despite being a secret tome, the first few pages of Volume 1 only talked about the base and foundation of the swordsmanship, as well as the behavior of the Kungan knights. The flutter of pages stopped once Jean arrived at the middle of the book. His gaze deepened as his mind tried to absorb the words on the page. The book that had only been describing the bases suddenly broached upon a difficult subject that Jean couldn't comprehend at all. I see. No wonder they're called secret tomes. It's not as easy as I thought. Despite being written in the continent's common language, Jean couldn't understand most of its contents due to his lacking skills and knowledge in swordsmanship. Before his sudden death in the Akin Kingdom, the 28-year-old Jean had attained the 3-star realm in swordsmanship. Not only was he slower to reach that stage than slightly skilled people in general, he could be considered defective compared to the average runcandle. However, it had only taken him half a year to reach that stage after his contract with Solderet, which could be considered an incredible feat nonetheless. The Kungan book was far too difficult for him to understand with his 3-star skills and knowledge in swordsmanship. Be that as it may, Jean had expected this outcome. He took out a notebook and pencil he had brought with him. Jean then began to copy the contents of the tome into his notebook. It was a transcription. In roughly 2 hours, he could copy around 10 pages of the book. Back in his days as a magician, he had transcribed so many books that the fingerprints on his fingers holding the pencil had begun to fade away. 10 pages per day. There were 3 years left until Jean would have to leave the Storm Castle. If he transcribed 10 pages every day during those 3 years, he could easily copy all the books here. And as I continue studying these, I'll slowly begin to understand the content over time. I'm sure there will be some tomes I won't have to transcribe. SCRT, SCRT. The sound of a pencil scratching paper resonated in the silent underground room. Jean took exactly 1 hour to copy 10 pages. He then retraced his steps and left the library. He plugged the hole in the wall with earth magic and the dirt around him. And so, 2 months went by. During that time, Jean had fully transcribed the 3 volumes from the Kungan clan, as well as 2 tomes about the Meyer clan's hand-to-hand combat techniques. As the days went by, Jean felt more and more energetic and enthusiastic. He had never felt happier to get out of bed in the mornings before. What excuse should I use to go down there today? Praying? Meditating? No. I used those yesterday and the day before that already. There was a rumor going around the castle, where the servants believed that the spirit of the dead bird had possessed Jean. He continuously went to its grave for 2 months in order to pray and meditate, so their confusion was understandable. Moreover, having heard this odd rumor, the Tana twins began to fear Jean to a far greater extent. Should I come up with an excuse that will let me go there every day without raising suspicion? After pondering for a while, Jean couldn't think of anything. How could he possibly convince everyone to let him go to the grave every day? Therefore, Jean began to change his train of thought. There's no need to convince them. If I tell them I'll go there every day, who would dare stand against me? This is the Storm Castle, not the clan's main residence. The guardian knights living here already served Jean as a true runcandle, instead of treating him like a child, and the servants had no right to disprove his decisions from the start. The Tana twins were terrified of Jean, so he had no reason to worry about them. The only problem was Gilly. A nanny's role was different to that of a knight or a servant. They were people who supervised and guided the children they were in charge of. Nanny Gilly. Yes, young master. I want to go there again. Again. Gilly's gaze was filled with concern. Haa. She let out a deep sigh and patted Jean on the head. Young master. It's unfortunate, but the bird has already passed away. It's been 2 months now. This nanny of yours is so concerned about you that she can't sleep properly at night. I've forgotten about the bird already. Honestly, I'm only going there every day because I like it there. Why don't you like it there? Young master. You mustn't enjoy being near a grave. Misfortune will befall upon you. What kind of misfortune? Graves are the home of the deceased. Nothing good will happen by staying close to one. You must steer clear from those places to be blessed with good fortune, young master. Apparently, the nannies of the Runcandle clan had a tendency to believe in superstitions as well. Jean was sighing and shaking his head in his mind. No, I'll keep liking graves from now on. Young master, nanny. Think about it. I'm the youngest child of the Runcandle clan. Once Jean took on a serious tone, Gilly's eyes widened. Why are you suddenly talking about how many graves do you think I'll have to make as I live in this world as a run candle? To tell the truth, I'm trying my best to understand what death is these days. So I'm going to that grave every day in order to get used to it. Ah. Gilly let out a mumble and stood there wordlessly. She stared blankly at her young master as if her thoughts had come to a sudden stop. Her 7-year-old young master, who was born as a predator, amongst the run candles, was trying to face the concept of fate and destiny already. Needless to say, that was all her own misunderstanding. Jean was just tricking his nanny, who was younger than him in his first life, to do his bidding. To be frank, no actual 7-year-old would talk about such topics, even if they were geniuses born in the dreadful Runcandle clan. Nevertheless, Gilly and the others at the Storm Castle had no reason to doubt Jin's words and actions. No one would imagine that he had retained the memories from his first life. Something has definitely changed about the young master ever since he met the Patriarch. The Patriarch must have told him something crucial. Gilly fixed her expression and bowed down. In that case, I will not stop you. I believe that the young master will one day become a remarkable knight who will lead the clan. And having listened to your honest opinion, I must say that I'm extremely proud of you, young master. Thanks, Gilly. Until I leave the Storm Castle, I'll be spending time at the grave for 1 to 2 hours every day. Yes, young master. And while I'm over there, I don't want to be disturbed in any way. Do you understand? I shall inform the knights about that. Also, young master. Yeah. If I were to say something as your nanny and as an adult, it's not always a good thing to think too deeply about such topics at a young age. Please enjoy yourself doing fun activities from time to time. Alright, Gilly. In that case, I want a strawberry pie as a snack later. With lots of honey on it. Gilly's stiff expression finally loosened as color returned to her face. I'll bake the best strawberry pie in the world. Have a good time. Jean smiled brightly and immediately left the room. I did it. Now I can concentrate on transcribing without having to worry about anything. During the past 2 months, Jean was always nervous when he entered the underground chamber. If the knights or Gilly came looking for him and discovered the hole, chaos would descend upon the clan. Since I managed to catch father's interest, they probably won't execute me even if they find out about this. But it would still be extremely troublesome and unnerving. A humming sound escaped his nose unconsciously. Even the earth resonance spell felt like it was creating a rhythm as it destroyed the underground wall he had resealed the previous day. He was planning on transcribing the final volume of the Meyer clan's tomes on hand-to-hand combat techniques. Scribble, scribble. As he rejoiced at how his remaining 3 years at the castle would be peaceful, he copied the contents of the page. His reincarnation was truly a blessing to him. The Meyer clan's hand-to-hand combat technique doesn't seem as difficult to understand as the Kungden clan's swordsmanship. But this passage about merging one's physical body with aura. I don't get it. Oh well, I'm sure it'll become clear with time. An hour went by inside the underground library. Having transcribed several pages without rest, Jin's thin and soft fingers were throbbing. As he decided to take a 3-minute break, click. He heard a noise behind the sliding door. Jean immediately stood up in surprise and focused his senses. It was the sound of the glass coffin opening. Chapter 8. Black Dragon Murakan, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. During the past 2 months he had spent transcribing the books underground. The only sounds that resounded down there were that of his pencil scribbling on paper and the occasional wind blowing. Therefore, despite being separated by the sliding door, Jean instinctively knew that Murakan's glass coffin was opening. Anyone else in Jin's situation would have come to the same conclusion. God damn it. Why is Murakan waking up now of all times? Badump. Badump. His heart accelerated like crazy as if it had lost complete control over itself. The calm and safe Storm Castle's underground area had suddenly become menacing and hazardous. A chill ran up his spine as cold sweat slid down his face. Could it be that I misheard it? As silence ensued, Jean began to doubt his ears. The previous sound could have been something else, or Jean might have imagined it from the beginning. However, his hopes were destroyed, as another click rang beyond the sliding door. As a matter of fact, that wasn't the only noise this time. He could hear clothes brushing against the glass coffin, along with the sound of someone's feet touching the ground. There was no way the dragon who had been sleeping for 1,000 years was suddenly sleepwalking. It could only have woken up for a clear reason and purpose. Or it could be that its slumber was finally over, and that the timing was a complete coincidence. Calm down, calm down. I've never offended Murakan before. It shouldn't be hostile towards me. He didn't remember Murakan waking up in his past life. There's no way Jean couldn't have heard of the news of Murakan's awakening, especially since he was still living in the Storm Castle back then as well. In that case, this incident is because of my return in time. My guess is that Murakan woke up because of my constant appearance here. There was a famous story around the continent. It said that one shouldn't disturb a sleeping dragon. Otherwise, one's life would be forfeited. Needless to say, despite being a famous story, people rarely came across dragons in real life. In any case, the moral of the story was that dragons have terrible personalities. Hey! Flinch! A low and deep voice reached Jean from behind the door. Jean was still pondering on how to survive this situation. A few chaotic seconds went by. He made up his mind on how to behave towards Murakan. Be respectful yet brazen. Even if Murakan tries to attack me, I just need to buy time until the knights arrive. But that was only for the worst-case scenario. And even if the worst-case scenario were to occur, Jean was confident that he could survive with his life intact at the very least. He could easily buy time with Sodaret's spiritual power, his own magic, and his silver tongue. It was unlikely that he would die. As soon as he reached that conclusion, the stress weighing down on his shoulders eased up. Murakan could also be different from what he imagined. The dragon could be friendly with him instead of being hostile. SCCRT. Jean stood up and slid the door open to face Murakan. The black-haired handsome young man he saw every day in the coffin was now standing straight before him. The dragon's human body was toned, and one would never believe that he had been asleep for over 1,000 years. R. Runcandle's descendant, greets the clan's guardian. Jean deliberately stuttered and spoke nervously. He believed that he should act like a child who was afraid of the 1,000-year-old dragon. Moreover, the Runcandles used to call Murakan their guardian, so Jean decided to emphasize that word. Ha! Murakan snorted. Guardian. Guardian. Did you just say, guardian? Ha! Wong. All he had done was speak out loud, but the mana inside the room began to tremble and spin around like a vortex. Say that again, you shitty brat. Did you just say that I'm your clan's guardian? Murakan's body disappeared into a handful of black smoke, only to materialize right before his eyes. Are you not Lord Murakan? I've been told that the black dragon Murakan is the Runcandle clan's guardian. When Jean answered properly, Murakan stared at him and blinked several times. He felt like there was no need to stutter and act scared anymore. Sigh, I see. Those damned Runcandle bastards. So that's what you told your descendants. Haha. And it's not like I can take out my anger on this chestnut-sized kid. This is driving me crazy. Jean was relieved after hearing the dragon's reply. Looks like he's not completely merciless against children. Nevertheless, the murderous intent within the dragon's black irides were an indication of his character. If Jean were in his original 28-year-old body, Murakan would have broken a limb or two without hesitation before continuing the conversation. But why on earth did the black dragon wake up now? It doesn't seem to be because I've been coming down here every day. Could there be some other reason? Ah, maybe it's because of Soderet's power. Spiritual power. The power of shadows. That was the only thing Jean could think of as the reason behind Muraken's awakening from his 1,000-year slumber. Jean didn't use spiritual power outside of special circumstances. But there was always a subtle amount of spiritual energy swirling around him, an amount that humans wouldn't be able to detect. Come to think of it, the contractors of gods generally have a guardian dragon by their sides, other than certain exceptional cases. Contractors of the god of flames Shinu received the favor of fire dragons, while contractors of the god of wind Meltsier are favored by wind dragons. That was the reason why the Zipfel clan was slightly more advanced than the Runcandle clan. Officially speaking, the Zipfel clan has more than 100 dragons under their command. Who knows how many more they have behind the scenes? While this was just Jin's hypothesis, depending on the outcome, this encounter between Jean and Muraken may be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The only problem is that my theory may be wrong. Moreover, I've never heard of a dragon whose attribute is similar to shadows. The current patriarch of the Zipfel clan is Keliarch Zipfel, the contractor of the god of flames Shinu. They say that he is very close with the fire dragon Kaden. The contractor of the god of wind Meltsier is the current second-in-command of the Zipfel clan, and is famous for handling a wind dragon. According to these two examples, dragons try to look for contractors who have a similar attribute as them. However, Jean had never heard of a story associating Soderet with a dragon. Even during his conversations with Soderet in his first life, the topic of Muraken was never brought up. Let's test it out for now. Thankfully, this isn't the worst-case scenario. If Muraken had truly woken up due to Jin's spiritual energy, then there was nothing for him to be afraid of. SSSSST. Humph. Muraken suddenly took in a deep breath, just like a dog who got a whiff of something delicious, or a heavy smoker who finally managed to light a cigarette. Ha. Anyways. This child isn't to blame for any of that. This energy smells nice. For some reason, it makes me feel great. What's your name, kid? It's Jean Runcandle, Lord Muraken. Good, good. Jean, you say. Honestly, I couldn't care less about your name. You're a Runcandle, right? Then lead me to Soderet's contractor right away. Soderet's contractor. That's right. This deep energy. Only the contractor could have such strong spiritual energy. I just hope this contractor isn't as rude as Timar, that son of a bitch. Timar Runcandle. The name of the first patriarch. Jean almost accidentally cried out in joy. It seemed his second life was going to be smooth sailing. To think that his earlier questions and concerns would be answered and resolved so quickly. It's certain now. He woke up because of the spiritual energy. Moreover, his reaction. It means that I'm the one in power in this relationship. Sniff, sniff. Sniff. Muraken was now completely ignoring Jean. He closed his eyes and focused on sensing the energy. Meanwhile, Jean pondered for a moment. Should I tell him I'm the contractor? Or should I say that I don't know what he's talking about? The first option would be preferable. With the first option, Jean would be able to order Muraken around like a servant in the future. The second option would be a lot more troublesome. If Jean acted ignorant, the dragon would tell him to bring an adult of the clan. And if Jean did bring an adult down here, he would have to explain how this situation occurred in the first place. In that scenario, he would have to kiss these peaceful days goodbye. He wouldn't be able to transcribe any more books. Moreover, his fateful encounter with Muraken would have amounted to nothing. Whoosh! A small ball of energy that danced like flames appeared on Jin's palm. Sniff. Oh. It's like my mind is getting clearer. Ha! Muraken savored the energy sent before opening his eyes. Immediately, he couldn't hide his surprise. It seems that I'm the contractor you're looking for, Lord Murakan. Why, you? Impossible. This is madness. Soderette made a contract with a kid like you. Murakan began to retreat in fear. He almost fell down from tripping on his own feet, as the panic in him began to grow. This is crazy. Unacceptable. Oi, Soderette. You're listening, right? Did you finally go bats hit? Explain yourself. While Murakan was freaking out, Jean created a second cluster of shadows on his other hand. My father told me that this power was given to me by the being who brought shadows into this world. Ugh. Thump. Murakan fell on his behind and looked up at Jean. Silence ensued. Jean wanted to continue their conversation, but the mood wasn't right. He couldn't bring himself to do so when he saw Murakan's composure fall apart in real time. Denial. Anger. Doubt. Fear. Surrender. His expressions were changing in that exact order. Oi. Soderette. This is a joke, right? This isn't right. Say something. Why is the promised contractor of 1,000 years this kid? Soderette never showed himself. His silence was also one of Jin's concerns. Back when they had made their contract, the two used to chat like good friends. But ever since right before his death, Soderette never spoke to Jin again to this day. In any case, it seemed Murakan needed some time to accept this reality. However, he was a dragon. Despite his short temper and wicked personality, he was still a dragon who had lived for thousands of years. He had a keen insight, along with an indomitable spirit that wouldn't despair at unexpected situations. Murakan soon ended up accepting this absurd situation. That was the most he could do right now. Sigh. Kid. Yes. It seems that you're the individual with whom I must adjust my breath, as according to my promise with Soderette. A dragon's breath. A dragon had personally declared as such to Jean. And it was Murakan, the black dragon the first patriarch had defeated, to boot. Back when he was a magician, his heart used to beat so loudly whenever he heard rumors of magicians fighting side by side with a dragon. Jin's nose began to itch as his emotions intensified. He couldn't control the heat rising to his face in excitement, so he ended up lowering his head. By adjusting your breath, you mean? Sigh. You're still too young to understand the details. And I'm not in the right mind to explain it to you right now. Jean silently nodded at his answer. First and foremost, as a friend of Soderette's, allow me to formally introduce myself to Soderette's contractor. Whoosh! A heavy wind blew in the room. A dark energy began to form in the air and swirled around Murakan's body. He was transforming into his dragon form. The dark energy covering Murakan expanded like a cloud, and a huge black dragon that completely filled up the underground room entered Jin's vision. I am Murakan. Soderette's proxy as well as his friend. The last descendant of the first being to be created from shadows. Following the 1,000-year promise, I shall be your life-long partner from today onwards. State your name. A grandiose voice shook the room. The hot-tempered attitude from earlier was nowhere to be found. I am Jean Runcandle. 13th and final child of the Runcandles. Jean answered as he barely repressed his trembling heart. Chapter 9. Until I turn 10, 1, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Fun. Every day is so fun. It's been about 6 months since the encounter with Murakan. Jean turned 8 years old and transcribed a total of 50 secret tomes. Today is the day the Tana twins leave the Storm Castle. Now no one will be bothering me for the next 2 years. Jean thought as he stared out the window, watching the servants pack the twins' luggage in the carriage. Ever since the day he pummeled them in the hallway and left them out by the bird's grave, the Tana twins never bothered him again. The servants delightfully call that incident the revenge of the bird, as they weren't very fond of the twins either. Jean wasn't the only one who was harassed by them in the past. But ever since that day, Jin's older brothers were obedient and would listen to his every word. He could order them around and treat them like servants, which was quite practical. However, the existence of their nanny, Emma, was disturbing. She would outright monitor Jean while pretending to be friendly with him. Within another few months, that shrewd woman would have tried to follow me when I'd go meditate at the grave. I can't have her discover that I've been going underground, so it's perfect that she's leaving now. To this day, Jean viciously ignored Emma and cut her off whenever she tried to approach him. Her true intentions were as clear as day. On the outside, she wanted him to get along with the Tana twins. But deep down, she was hoping for Jean to fall from grace and be trampled on by the twins. Emma's disturbing gaze will finally be no more. If something like this happens again in the future, I'll have to take action and deal with her. Until this day, Emma hadn't bared her fangs or backstabbed Jean openly. Despite that, Jean decided to give Emma a farewell gift that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "Young master, you must go bid farewell to your brothers now." "Alright, Gilly. Let's go." The two of them descended to the Storm Castle's courtyard. Under the constant downpour, the knights who had come to escort the Tana twins to the main house were standing in silence. 1-7 Guardian Knight, and 5-6 Guardian Knights. They were all part of the Runcandle's main house. The twins were at the center, wearing relieved smiles as they would finally be distanced from their devilish brother. Elder brothers. "Ah, yeah, Jean." Hey, as Jean spoke to them with a large grin, his brothers tensed up. "Why are you so surprised?" "I'm just here to see you off." Thanks. Jean. "I guess I won't be seeing you for another 2 years." "That's too bad, isn't it?" Despite not agreeing with him, the Tana twins furiously nodded their heads. After patting them on the shoulders, Jean then turned to Emma. "Stay safe too, Nanny Emma." "Thank you very much, young master. Could you bend down for a bit?" Emma lowered herself to match Jin's eye level. He then approached her ear and whispered. "Emma. I hope you act with a bit more caution at the main house." As soon as her brain processed the meaning behind his words, Emma's face paled into a deathly white hue. When she realized that this 8-year-old child had fully noticed her actions and hidden intentions, a jolting chill ran down her spine. Her throat squeezed up, and she couldn't respond to him. Nevertheless, Emma somehow forced her body to move and bowed to Jean, while trying to conceal her trembling. "We must depart now. Young Master Jean, I shall await with impatience to see your dignified appearance in 2 years." "Very well." The knights raised their swords to salute Jean before departing. They then got on the carriage waiting at the bottom of empty Murakan and headed to the Runcandle main house, the Garden of Swords. Jean would also head there in another 2 years. Blasted kid. Explain yourself already. An explanation that I can understand. The Storm Castle's underground area. Murakan expressed his frustrations to Jean as he grabbed the basket Jean had brought. The 8-year-old boy lightly brushed off his words and moved to the shelf. How can this be? Why is there only one strawberry pie in the basket? Are you looking down on the great Murakan? Murakan was angry, because of a strawberry pie. Ah, geez. Be thankful you at least have one pie. I had to save some of my share. Do you truly believe a dragon would feel full from a single measly pie? Well, I didn't believe dragons could become furious because of strawberry pies, but now I do. The strawberry pie was the first gourmet food Murakan had eaten in 1,000 years. It was also the only food that could satiate his stomach, tongue, and mind in this underground chamber since he was still trapped down here. Don't you feel full even without food thanks to my spiritual energy? Enough with that nonsense of yours. You heartless brat. Don't you know that dragons are very picky gourmets? And not only am I unable to leave this stuffy place because of your circumstances, now you won't give me extra strawberry pies. Murakin hadn't left the underground chamber ever since his awakening. It was all for Jean. He needed to hide his connection with Murakin until he was strong enough, and Murakin also believed that was the correct choice. The underground chamber was only accessible to the flag-bearers. If the clan learned that Jean had been sneaking down here in order to copy the secret tomes, Siren would most probably ask Murakin to take responsibility as well, even if he were the clan's guardian deity who had awoken from a 1,000-year slumber. In other words, Jean and Murakin were accomplices of the same crime. Ha! You and that gourmet tongue of yours. You're the one who said you didn't like any of the food I brought other than the pie. Do you think it's so easy to airlift strawberries to this storm castle? Jean also wanted to give a piece of his mind about this topic. Not only was there a constant downpour at the castle regardless of seasons, it was also located at the peak of empty Murakin. It wasn't a simple task to supply the castle with fresh strawberries. Moreover, this gourmet black dragon said that all the other food at the storm castle was trash, and only asked for Gilly's strawberry pie. God damn it. Is this an era where people can't even eat strawberry pies properly? There are only 2 years left of this era you speak of, so finish eating that already. Let's begin training. It also seems to be an era where rude kids mess around with powerful black dragons. Munch. In the end, Murakin yielded. It wasn't as if a non-existing strawberry pie would appear out of thin air just because he got mad at the kid. Delicious. Damn, this is crazy delicious. Did you say your nanny cooked it? You must definitely introduce me to her when I get out of here. Yeah, you already said that dozens of times. Jean replied as he shook his head in exasperation. During the past 6 months, Jin's vision of dragons was completely destroyed by the slob before him. The legendary dragons he had imagined during his days as a magician. The wise, majestic, mysterious yet powerful beings. But the dragon before him was childish, extremely whimsical, and a complete slob. He would always be lying down, scratching his groins as he complained about something. Scratch, scratch. Having devoured the strawberry pie in an instant, Murakin was once again scratching an odd place. The only thing that my imagination was correct about is how powerful dragons are, maybe. Ever since the day after their first encounter, Murakin began to teach Jean how to manipulate spiritual power along with several types of martial arts. Despite having never fought him in person, Jean could sense how strong Murakin was through his teachings and guidance. However, most of Murakin's strength was currently sealed because Jin's spiritual energy was still too weak. Spiritual energy was a necessity to Murakin's strength and survival, just like how the sun was necessary to plants, and how aquatic life forms needed the sea to survive. In other words, Jin was like the sun to Murakin. An irreplaceable existence. However, it was a sun that needed to grow stronger. In order for Murakin's full strength to return, Jin had to grow older and become more powerful. Do that transcription thing for 30 minutes, then come to the hallway. Alright. After finishing the transcription, Jin left and entered the hallway to face Murakin. What did you copy today? The Attila clan's book of swordsmanship. Oh. Attila. Their swordsmanship was pretty decent. Reminds me of how I sunk my teeth into their patriarch and killed him about 1,500 years ago. Did you understand some of it? About 30% of the content. I didn't quite get the rest of it. Don't be discouraged. It's still incredible that you understood 30% of it at your age. Having comprehended about 30% of the Attila clan's secret book at the tender age of 8 was an enormous feat. However, Jin was craving for more. The enormous feat was according to the Runcandle standards. But with this being his second life, Jean wanted to achieve far more than just that. If he couldn't exceed the normal genius standard, he would once again be unable to overpower his 12 genius siblings. How much of this book would the first patriarch have understood at my age? Kohaha. Right, right. You did say that you chose Timar's sword during the selection ritual. Is that why you keep comparing yourself to him? No, it's because I've heard people endlessly say that the first patriarch was the strongest man in history. So much that the phrase is engraved in my mind now. That's why I'm comparing myself to him. The strongest man in history, you say? Fair enough. Timar truly was incredibly strong. Even your father, who's called the Genesis Knight, is probably one level weaker than Timar. That was a realm of strength that Jean couldn't even imagine. Despite Jin's rapid growth speed during his final 3 years of life after making a contract with Sodaret, he still had a long way to go to reach the Genesis Knight realm. Even if he became an unparalleled magic swordsman like Sodaret had said, Jean still wasn't sure if he could defeat his father. Sure. Alright. I guess it would be best to make it clear. O.org make what clear? The difference between you and Timar. Jean nodded as he focused on Muraken's next words. At the age of 8, Timar would not have been able to understand a single sentence in that book. A short pause followed, before Muraken continued speaking. But one's talents cannot always be measured by one's knowledge and understanding of swordsmanship. From what I've seen, you are quite gifted. In fact, you're like a genius that's born once every hundreds of years. However, you still can't compare to Timar. That's somewhat disheartening. I'm sure that your Genesis Knight father is far more gifted than you are. Then, will I never be able to overpower my father because of the disparity in our talents? To overpower his father. That was the reborn Jin's biggest and most ambitious goal. If he couldn't win against Siren, Jin would have no choice but to live while trying not to stand out again, so that he doesn't incur the Runcandle's wrath. The pathetic death in his first life. 3 9-star knights who had attacked the Akin kingdom. Jin's hypothesis was that Siren had secretly dispatched those 3, even though he strongly wished it were false. Indeed, you won't win against your father if it purely comes to swordsmanship. If it purely comes to swordsmanship. That's right, you brat. Don't think that the world solely revolves around swordsmanship. You also have spiritual power and magic at your disposal. True enough. If you master magic and spiritual power to the extreme limits, it may be possible to become stronger than Timar, let alone your father. So don't be impatient. I'm not impatient. I just wanted to know my limits. Ha! You're still thinking about your limits even after gaining Sodaret's spiritual power. Maybe it's because you're still a kid. You're just too unaware. Sodaret's nickname amongst the gods is the Infinite. Infinite. That's right, infinite. The potential you have is far greater than anyone else in the world. It's infinite. Limitless. That's why, just focus on growing up for now. You have to leave this suffocating place and explore the world in order to experience life. In that case, what's today's training about? Releasing your spiritual energy. You can always learn the basics of martial arts later on. So from today onwards, till the day you leave the Storm Castle, you will only train your spiritual powers.